Recording in progress.
All right, I want to welcome everybody to a joint meeting with the Select Board, the Wellfleet Selectboard and the Wellfleet Board of Health. We are opening our side of the meeting up, so the Board of Health meeting is up and running. Off to you, John.
Okay, thank you. This is, as Mr. Granlund said, a joint meeting of the Wellfleet Board of Health and the Wellfleet Select Board. The Wellfleet Select Board will now open its meeting. The time is now 5:33 on September 9th, 2025. Just to a point of clarity, there will be no public comment period at the beginning of this meeting, as it's a working meeting, but the boards will be accepting questions once the presentation and discussion is complete. So with that, we'll move on to the business at hand. I'll introduce the wastewater consultant, Mr. Russell Kleekamp.
Yes, sir.
Did I get it right?
You did, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me tonight. Shall I begin with my presentation? Okay, so
That's okay with the Board of Health.
Yes, please do.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Russ Kleekamp. I'm the service area leader with the company Environmental Design and Research, EDR for short, and I'm here tonight to present the findings of our peer review. Town of Wellfleet is currently going through their wastewater planning, and it was asked 3 specific questions for EDR that revolve around the costs of the nitrogen removing systems, the growth rate, and then also a discussion on the number of EIA systems, or that the town would, the minimum number of EIA systems that would be required to comply with the nitrogen reduction requirements as presented by the state. So this was a common trend between all 3 questions, was to work closely with GHD and also Scott Horsley. So I've been involved going back maybe 6 months on the weekly wastewater meetings or the biweekly Wednesday meetings that we've had. And I've also watched a number of the select board meetings, Board of Health meetings, had a chance to review the MEPA comments. So that was a collaborative effort, lots of discussions with Scott Horsley offline about certain things. So I'm happy tonight to go through the draft findings of the peer review. So the first question was to prepare the life cycle costs for nitrogen removing septic systems, including construction, replacement costs, operation, maintenance, and monitoring. So I'm sure the table that everybody's eager to look at is on page 9 of this report that summarizes the costs. I'm not trying to skip everything. But it was an interesting exercise. So as a peer reviewer, you review information that's provided and develop your findings. So as I learned with the town of Wellfleet, using what was first enhanced IA systems that got changed to the terminology nitrogen removing systems, it's really 2 specific systems that the town is looking at to use because of their higher performing standards, the Nitro and the Nitrex systems. So that was the focus of the cost development on those 2 items. Because there was limited information, cost information provided on the Nitro system, I received 1 canvas of bids from Scott Horsley with a project, I believe in Truro, that had 5 bidders on it, and then just a email correspondence from Pio Lombardo outlining his costs, his expected capital construction costs for the Nitrex systems. So I took it 1 step further, and I reached out to a couple of the contractors on Cape Cod, the Robert B. Auer Company and GFM Enterprises, 2 outfits that have a lot of experience installing IA systems. And I did ask them can you provide me as many recent quotes as you can on Cape Cod, just to get an idea of these systems. So I did get quite a bit of quotes, 10 or 11 of them. But after further review, looking through these, only 1 of the 10 or 11 was an actual Nitrex system. And the cost for that, and this is not including the Nitrex tank, was $49,400. So when you add in the cost of the Nitrex tank, which is estimated to be roughly $24,000, it brings us up close to that $75,000 number. So on Mr. Lombardo's email that was circulated with the town, he had recommended 4 different breakouts of the cost, a lowest cost, medium, a high cost, and then a higher cost. So the average, let me just find in my report. Yes, on page 2, Mr. Lombardo had a range of 50 to 75,000 for a lowest, low, high, and then a highest cost of 90,000. So we have one quote that's roughly around $75,000, and then we have the information from Mr. Lombardo. So for a planning perspective, when we use these numbers for wastewater planning, whether it's a capital cost of a sewer system or a cost of a EIA system, generally you don't want planning numbers to go up. You want those to come down as we get more detailed and more finite information. Also, being an engineer on Cape Cod for the better part of over 20 years, working a lot in Provincetown, to do goods and services installations as we're approaching the Outer Cape, there is a geographic element to it. Contractors may have to drive a little bit further. It may not be right in their backyard. So based on the quotation that I received and the numbers from Mr. Lombardo, I chose to take the average between the 75 and the 90, which turns out on page 9 to 82,500. And I'm reporting these costs as the estimated average cost. There is a heavy caveat that if the town does move forward with nitrogen removing systems, really homeowners should be getting 4 to 5 quotes, which if I'm a homeowner right now listening to them, oh great, one more thing to do, I got to go out and get quotes, this is going to add to the, and there are ways as this moves forward where the towns can pre-qualify engineers, contractors, maybe steps as this develops that we can look to make that a little bit easier, but you certainly need to get multiple quotations. The example in Truro, if you just stuck with, you called the first bidder you called was the highest quote, it was up to $80,000, and another one was $50,000. So there's a tremendous swing for the residential construction, and that is something that we definitely want to keep in mind moving forward. The nitro system, the information provided, was certainly lower than the Nitrex based on the information provided. We're looking more around the 51,500 number for that. And again, that's based on, it's a little challenging because when you cost estimate, you know, one of the best ways you do it is you look at local projects that are installed. With only a handful of the nitro systems, or at least the quotations I was provided, that's the information we have. But that being said, it's not dramatically different from an IA system because it is just another tank, another process when you look at the physical dimensions of what needs to be installed. So it falls right in line with the neighboring communities, the numbers we've seen of roughly that $50,000 for what the other towns or what we're calling these nitrogen removing systems. Any questions so far?
I have one, actually.
Yes.
Between the Nitrex and the nitro, if people start putting these systems in down the road, how much do we know and how much do we not know about how effective these are going to be respectively over the period of time? And what could be the consequences if one is found to be less effective than the other? Good
question. Mr. Lombardo has provided me with a significant amount of information proving the efficacy of the Nitrex systems. Some remarkable numbers that are pushing down. I know we use the effluent number of, it's provisionally approved for 10 milligrams per liter. There's a lot of results showing it's producing 7.6 milligrams per liter. And again, the caveat with it is proper installation, proper maintenance. It's really if the town makes this decision to incorporate this, there needs to be safeguards in place to make sure that that installation and that maintenance is kept up with. Because you're right, if the maintenance is not kept up with, the last thing we want to do 20 years from now is have to install a sewer where we had these nitrogen removal systems.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, thank you for this, Mr. Kleekamp. It's really good to have such a thorough report. This question can wait till later, and it may be more of a question for admin, but at some point, could we kind of put this in the context of what we're together here to work on? Because this is a really important piece of it, but I would love to have kind of an overview of what our plan is for tonight and what we hope to accomplish. Thank you. Again, more of a question maybe for admin.
Tom?
Thank you, John. In Lombardo's materials that you received and we've read, was there any differentiation on seasonal homes that have installed this versus 12-month residents on the effectiveness and efficacy of these things if they're not up and running all the time?
Yep. So we do see through you, Mr. Chair, we do see when there's a period of shutdown in order to reestablish the process that removes the nitrogen, you generally see a higher nitrogen effluent, at least based on the information I was providing on those first month or two when you put it back into operation. And then once it resumes its normal operating status, and you start to see that nitrogen really start to fall with some really good numbers. But I think I understand the question. Is a highly seasonal community, if X amount percent of homes are seasonal, and then the first 2 months don't meet your nitrogen, because we base everything on 10 milligrams per liter, so many homes, and then the first 2 months come in at 12 or 15, but then we're hoping that the follow-up months are coming in to that 7 and that 5, which everything I'm shown with proper maintenance and monitoring, we expect that to happen. But there is a component of higher nitrogen in the effluent upon startup of a system like this. And the same holds true for wastewater treatment plants. We see smaller package plants that may serve a school or something like that. It goes down for the summertime, and then you have to restart the process with the plant. And you even see it on a Title V level. If you have to seed the bacteria in your Title V system, you know, it's all a microbial process happening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just along the same lines, I've heard anecdotal things about cleaning products when there's a heavy bleach and heavy like because they rely on microbial components.
Is it the quaternary ammonia that you're?
Well, I had just anecdotally heard issues if there's a lot of bleach used. We have a lot of weekly cleanings for these seasonal houses because they're not just seasonal, they're short-term rentals. And so if they're constantly killing the bacteria in the system with bleach, is there a potential risk there when you do this and scale it out, you know, over whatever it is? I mean, 65% I think of the homes are seasonal, and a lot of those are short-term rentals.
Very good question, and there is definitely a concern with high-strength industrial cleaning products. In fact, Town of Bourne's plant went down, I think within the last 2 years, they got a massive slug of the quaternary ammonia, and it kills their process. And not exactly sure where it came from, but if there's coming from assisted living facilities, healthcare, so that falls under the homeowner education. For any home that gets this, there will have to be a public relations and a homeowner education standpoint discussing what you can flush and what you cannot flush. Single-ply white toilet paper and anything that comes out of the human body. Nothing else. No dental floss, no chicken wings. Just because you can flush it and the box says flushable, you should not be flushing it. Mm-hmm. And that has plagued communities, even when we talk sewer systems, the same thing for traditional sewers. We're seeing it left and right, up and down in Cape Cod with, in Barnstable, we had one years ago that a pump station got clogged and it was traced back to the type of paper towels because the high school switched the type of paper towels and it was upstream of it. And that led to some issues. We're seeing some other concerns with grease in communities and how it fouls the system. So, yes, it is a homeowner education, and it's certainly not going to help the process to be flushing high-strength and type of cleaning products.
Sheila? Or
Sorry, did you have?
No, go ahead.
You may have addressed this. So we talked about the installation costs. We spoke about the installation costs. Did you touch on what you found as far as like that annual maintenance would be? What, did you touch? If you touched on that, I didn't hear it.
Oh, I apologize. I did not say it verbally yet. But where we landed with the, and right now for the annual maintenance costs, I have in the report a number of $3,250. And what that's derived from is both, I've received quotes from both Nitro and Nitrex for what their required monitoring is. And how I understand this is that DEP requires any IA systems to go in that have to be monitored so they can track the results. The cost and the number that I don't have or I'm not confident with is once we use this to solve the town's nitrogen problem, the town cumulatively has to take these results and report it to the state. So there's an extra step of reporting in this. And until I get a better document that clearly spells out. We have had some good talks with Mass TC and the septic utility program. But to slay it plainly, and I'm always thinking, town meeting, the residents have to be confident with the answers that we're giving them. And right now, I just don't have a super defensible monthly operating plan that includes the additional permitting to the state of Mass, partially because this is a new program, the nitrogen sensitive. We just haven't gotten that far yet. Again, I try to be conservative with these planning level numbers, so I used that. I don't see it being more than 1,000. In fact, I've heard much less from Mass TC, but until I get this on paper and it's verified, that's the
could go
number
up
I
to
landed
that.
on. Nitro, so the 3,250, the Nitrex was 2,250 for the first 3 years, and then the Nitro was slightly cheaper. So I'm using that 3,250 to cover both. It may in actuality be a little bit lower, but for a planning level number, this is what I feel confident with at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Ryan?
So, this memo covers the cost to individually service these properties with the best available nitrogen reducing technologies of nitro and nitrex. And then starts doing a comparative analysis for servicing the same properties with a sewer. But there's a difference in the comparative performance of a sewer versus a on-site septic system. Typically with a sewer, they're permitted for, is it 3 milligrams per liter?
That's what we as designers, it's challenging to get beneath the 3 milligrams per liter, but that's the number that's being used, and that's correct.
So even with the best performing system data currently is 7.6 milligrams per liter. So if you have a sewer system, the actual outflow of nitrogen is less than half. And how do you think we should address that in our planning processes?
Good question. So on page 7, I gave some comparison examples on how, we've heard a lot about the sewer, it's 3 houses to 1 or 2 houses to 1, and how much does, how much do these really take out and what's the comparison with sewers? So I was trying to think how to come up with a relatively easy way to explain this. So let's theoretically take a watershed that has 50 homes on it, one street with 50 homes. State of Massachusetts comes out and says you have to remove X amount of nitrogen. And if you were to put in a BARNT technology, best available nitrogen reduction technology that meets the Mass DEP general use provisions for 19 milligrams per liter, and you had 50 homes and all 50 have to get this BARNT system, the answer is for how many sewers, you need 15. And it turns into a mass balance equation. So using the number that Mass DEP recommends for what the influent, that means coming into this system, is 26.25 milligrams per liter. So that's what Mass DEP is saying. If you found the pipe that goes out of your basement into the septic system, if you drilled a little hole on it, took a sample, sent it to the lab, Mass DEP is saying that's 26.25 for the purposes of doing these calculations. May actually be higher than that in all actuality, but for the purposes of the planning and the way that the state runs it, that's the number that we use. So to go from 26.25 to 19 is what these BARNT systems are doing. They're only removing 7 milligrams per liter. And I think I have it with the percentage.
Sure.
You do.
So I actually was talking about basically nitro and nitrex.
Yep.
And not the general use permitted.
I'm getting there. Sometimes I take too long when I answer a question. So as that number, that 19 milligrams per liter comes down, for example, in nitro, that's provisionally approved at 11 milligrams per liter, turns into 58% removal. And that equivalent I'm sorry, I ran the comparison with the Nitrex at 10 milligrams per liter. So under that scenario, if all 50 of those homes needed to put a Nitrex in at 10 milligrams per liter, and that's what the Nitrex is achieving, 35 properties would have to be sewered because the sewer gets it down from 10 to 3. So you have to look at that starting number is the 26.25. and then what the finished number is. So conventional sewer is at 3, it's going from 26.25 to 3. With the nitrex, it's going from 10 milligrams per liter. So it's not a division of the 3 milligrams per liter to what the systems are performing. You have to look at what the total nitrogen calculation is based on, and I assumed 130 gallons per day for water flow, which is fairly standard for residential. But it truly is a math equation, and that's how, if the town does elect to use EIAs, now from a planning point, the least amount of nitrogen removing systems would be based on the highest performing one, which right now is either the nitro or the nitrex. So for example, if Mass DEP said, okay, we'll grant you 7.6 milligrams per liter, under that same scenario, 40 homes would have to be connected to sewer. So it's not even a 1 to 2. As that number starts reaching closer to 3 milligrams per liter, it drops off. The comparison, it's not, I'm probably not explaining this terribly effectively, but it is spelled out in the peer review, the exact calculation you use to do that. And I think and part of your question is how would we advise the town moving forward with that calculation? So this is a good one because all my experience, again, has been with municipal planning, 6 towns on Cape Cod that are currently either planned or putting sewers in now. So the way Mr. Horsley did it with using the provisional numbers is probably the most accurate way you could do it, using those provisional numbers at 10 and 11 milligrams per liter. But it will slightly change if you're planning on 10 versus 11 based on the finite amount of homes that you're using. And I think the argument is as these go in, we have tremendous faith in these systems. They do work, they're good. If that number 7.6 or it starts to come down, on the next wave of installations, we can start to credit that lower number. But that's if the first wave goes good and if we even decide to do that first wave, because the third part of this question is to look at a scenario where, or the third question asked was to look at a scenario working with GHD to identify a sewer system that would allow the town to have 0 nitrogen reducing systems, 0 cluster systems, because it would be exclusively sewer. And then once you get that information, then that's having a sidebar conversation that, you know, the board needs to make a very defensible decision here with wastewater. In order for the board to do that is they really do need all the information. So when someone asks, why am I not getting sewer? Why am I getting any? We have an answer that's bulletproof and that's straight face. Until we've done the comparative analysis with a full sewer system, we don't have that information. The good news is GHD is working on that now, and we're hoping to have that pulled together very soon. That's why some of the numbers in the table on page 9 are to be determined, because the size of the sewer system is going to dictate the size of the O&M required for the sewer system and what that cost is. So once the town is presented, we have the 2 options in our TWMP now. We'll get a third option that shows a larger sewer system. It will have a cost associated with it. There'll be discussion on that. Then I believe GHD can do their full analysis and provide that life cycle cost for the determined sewer layout.
Josh?
You know, I think it was tremendously helpful to see the full life cycle cost of both of these systems, which is significantly higher than what the TWMP has been proposing. You know, and so walking out the numbers of nitrex and nitro. So if you think about install costs, engineering, 20 years of monitoring, and the life cycle costs, and then we take the same blended ratio of retrofits versus net new systems to the TWMP's numbers for the hybrid plant, which is about 2,250 systems have to go in 20 years. So that's, you know, roughly, what is that going to be, 112-ish systems a year. We're looking at a cost of between 235 to 270 million, depending if we go with just nitrex or nitro or blended, which is a significantly higher cost than what we have in the TWMP. And I believe that, and this is kind of a bridge conversation that we'll then get into how we might address, you know, the Board of Health regulations going forward. But my understanding has always been that the town of Wellfleet has been proposing a very large EINA plan because it was the cheaper alternative to a central sewer district that would have reduced the entire nitrogen load that we were required to reduce. these numbers are starting to show that that might not be the case. Now, we don't have the price tag for this 100% sewer, which is difficult to have this conversation in totality because we don't have that missing puzzle piece. But, I mean, these numbers for this EI&A plan are now going way up to the point where I think we need to seriously consider an approach that really focuses first on sewer and really uses these EI&A systems as the backup plan, the contingency plan, if we cannot afford to install a 100% sewer plan. Is that an accurate analysis and overview of how?
It certainly is. We need to do an accurate alternatives, a comparative analysis in order for this to be defensible for the residents. With the other towns I've worked at, I remember 20-something years ago, one of my first jobs, my supervisor came up to me and said, I want you to design the collection system for the town of Chatham, and I want you to use this thing called SewerCAD. I said, okay, let me learn SewerCAD, and that's the modeling software that's used to design gravity sewers and lay it all out. Performed the same exercise in Barnstable, Falmouth, Mashpee, moved on to be a project manager for a town of Harwich, Wareham, and then served as an OPM for a few towns. But the one common point that these other towns that are currently in implementation is the first step they did is we look at a 100% gravity layout. So here's the interesting thing. When we talk about sewers, there's actually 3 different kinds of sewers: gravity sewers, low pressure sewers, and vacuum sewers. From a homeowner's perspective, we really like the gravity sewers because they have the least amount of moving parts. It's the least things that can go wrong. It's just a pipe that's pitched down going through your yard into another pipe in the street that's pitched down, goes to a pump station, and away it goes. And while gravity systems are great, there's pros and cons with those too. For an area that has varying terrain, every time you have a low point, you usually need to put a pump station there because the whole system works by gravity. When you're on Cape Cod, the low points are usually by water, whether it's saltwater, freshwater, things like that. So that means you potentially might have these gravity pipes that are installed upwards of 20 feet in areas of high groundwater. Why is that a concern? Because one thing that plagues every gravity sewer system, existing or proposed, is something called inflow and infiltration. It's when groundwater or rainwater seeps into your gravity sewer system, then your treatment plant starts treating clean water, and that's not what you want your treatment plant to do. You want your treatment plant to clean dirty water. So when we look at the designs of these sewers, that's the other thing that we want to take a look at is where is groundwater, because the alternative to the gravity sewer system is something called a low pressure system, which is instead of having a single pipe that goes down a road that collects these 50 homes that we're using for an example, it goes to a pump station and then away it goes. How a low pressure system works is every property gets a small, it's called the grinder pump. It looks like the size of a trash can lid. And it's a little mini pump station, and all these little pump stations work together and push that sewage through small diameter pipes that are typically installed about 4 feet deep. So we have to think about the question, if we look at a full sewer layout, okay, that's good. You're going to see some areas of gravity, you're going to see some areas of low pressure, but the low pressure is about 50% of the installation cost of gravity when you look at a large system. So areas of Wellfleet that might be down by the water, anytime you have the pump station or municipal infrastructure in flood zones, that requires the critical equipment to be elevated, either up on a platform, so the control panels, the generators. Where I start thinking about that is downtown Wellfleet, beautiful area, someone's scenic views. Do you really want a generator up on a 20-foot high platform somewhere? And I'm being a little facetious about it. It may not be that obvious, but wherever you have these pump stations within a flood zone, you have to elevate out with the infrastructure. So the alternative is a low pressure system where you don't have these pump stations. And one of the nice things about low pressure systems is they're a pressurized sealed system, and you don't have to worry about I&I. And that's one of the major pros. Just like a lot of the really great improvements in the world of nitrogen removing systems, on the flip side, sewer technology is also improving. For example, one of the concerns years ago with the grinder pumps, and you still hear it to this day, is what happens if we get a power outage. Typically, the E1, the grinder pumps, they have roughly in the range of 60 gallons capacity, which fills up pretty quickly. So some of the new grinder pumps on the market have storage of up to 200 or 500 gallons, especially for areas that are prone to power outages. So a 500-gallon sump on your low pressure would give you 3 or 4 days in the event of a power outage. So these are all things that the industry sees, we adapt to, we move it forward. And then the third type of sewer is called a vacuum sewer. Works just like a central vac in a house. You have a big vacuum station providing suction, and it pulls all the sewage. So one of the systems flows by gravity, one pushes all the sewage, and one pulls all the sewage. What we need to start thinking about is as we start adopting, for Provincetown, for example, has gravity, low pressure, and vacuum. They have all three. Both low pressure and vacuum have their own individual components. There's a lot of parts and pieces that need maintenance and repair. If we start getting into multiple technologies, we have to think about who is maintaining this, who is operating this, and there's a real benefit to have a streamlined system of uniformity with your infrastructure. For example, your DPW is probably not going to have a Ford truck, a Chevy truck, a Ram, a Toyota, and a Nissan. They all have different oil filters that have to be changed. They all have different things about them. So we want to think about the same thing when we start designing our infrastructure too. There's different types of pump stations. There's submersible, suction lift, wet pit, dry pit for larger ones. So if we standardize, for example, we want to do a hybrid system of gravity with low pressure. All the low pressure units are going to be this. We're going to go with all suction lift pump stations to make it easier, so the operators only have to get trained on one type of stations. These are the exact discussions we have with the other towns once we determine the extent of the sewer system. I understand we're not quite there yet here, but we're getting there very closely. I did get a sneak peek of the model that Anastasia is working on, and it was designed very thoughtfully. You know, I brought up the issues of are we looking at low pressure in areas of high groundwater? How many pump stations are you going to have? Where are they going to be located? Things like that. And the good news for Wellfleet, at least I'm always trying to find that the silver lining is that we're starting from scratch. We can utilize the best technology. We can really learn off the mistakes of other towns. Not that, there's critical, but there's learning curves with all of these projects. And we also, and it's not a tremendously large area in the world of sewers. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too early, but GHD alluded to there might even be less than 10 pump stations for your whole system coverage. Other towns have up to 8 or 9 phases, and they could have multiple contracts within each phase, and a single contract for another town could have 5 pump stations. So these other towns are looking at a much broader infrastructure. So the good news is that means these pump stations that you're going to have, they're going to be on the smaller side. So that was a lot.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is if we were to go with a low-pressure system, that would put the onus on homeowners to have backup power for their grinder pumps, would it not?
Not necessarily, if a home doesn't, and that's why the sumps have been a larger size to the 200 and 500 gallons. So it's 60 gallons, you're absolutely right. I believe what the town of Wareham does when there's a power outage, they have a dedicated crew with a generator that goes out and energizes each home and shoots it right in there. So that's how they decided to manage that. But again, we have the latest and greatest technology. So if we look at that 200 or the 500 gallon, it helps quell that argument.
Right.
We are going to hear with low pressure, it may need an upgraded electrical at our house. So that's thankfully it's a relatively low draw that these systems put on it. But there may be properties that need electrical upgrades. Generally, it's less intrusive than the installation of a nitrogen reducing system. You'll see in the report, I think I put it in there a few times, that to really get a good idea of the cost per parcel, there's a few other factors that come into play, the landscaping, irrigation, electrical upgrades, just the physical location of it. And until we do the next step and look at a parcel by parcel basis, we don't have those numbers, and we got to use those disclaimers. So the installation of a grinder pump is about the same intrusion, a little bit more than a gravity lateral, basically a straight line coming from where that septic pipe exits the home out to the street. In some cases, if an existing home has their septic tank in the backyard, plumbing either has to be changed within the home, or if we can fit it around the house to tie it in to the main in the street. But that's, of course, the necessary step when you put a sewer main, whether it's low pressure, gravity, or vacuum in the road, is you want all those properties to connect right to it.
Can the existing septic tank be used as the collection point to install the pump in?
In some cases I think that's referred to as a step or a steg system, where you can physically put that pump in the septic tank.
And that
and
becomes
use that
the-
for the housing. If you can't, you generally abandon them in place, either take the covers, fill them in sand, and something along those lines.
The other question is, if I recall correctly, Provincetown experimented with a vacuum system and had some rather notable issues.
Yeah, their first issue happened when a cell phone smashed through a bend.
Oh, that's right.
On one of the, I believe it was supposed to be a Schedule 80 bend, it was Schedule 40. So with a vacuum system, any debris that gets in there kind of becomes a projectile. With the grinder pump systems, that's physically a grinder pump. It's macerating whatever is supposed to be flushed, or hopefully if it's not supposed to be flushed, but that grinder pump will physically grind it into a slurry that pushes it. In a vacuum system, if a physical object gets flushed that has any weight or velocity to it, it can potentially cause a penetration. Now that, I believe, was a difference of materials. The Schedule 80 should have been installed in that case. But it brings up an interesting point, and it's more of a personal concern, is just with the system that works on suction, anytime you have a break or a void, you get vacuum loss. And you don't have that with a low-pressure system because all the pump station, you're pushing it. And while, again, vacuum systems are a relatively shallow installation, they will likely have a cheaper capital cost than a gravity system, is that you just want to think about those things. Also in cold weather, so there's 3 communities in Massachusetts that have vacuum systems: Newburyport, Barnstable, and Provincetown. Early on, there was some issues with water getting inside the valve pits that freeze the vacuum valve open. And when that was determined, it was in the middle of nor'easters. And the only way you can figure that out is if you physically put your ear up to the candy cane vent and listen for the suction. But when you're in a nor'easter blowing 60 miles an hour, it becomes very challenging for the operators that have to go out. And I always do like to think about the end product is who are the people that are going to be turning the nuts and bolts in all these systems? And how do we make the system as accommodating as possible for those who are going to be operating it? And then the second incident with Provincetown, I believe they had a lightning strike that damaged some of the electrical controls. That was a few summers ago. Now, truth be told, that could happen to a regular pump station, or it just so happened it hit the main vacuum station in town and really took a toll on them.
If I could, oh, you have it. I just wanted to make a comment that I remember that first episode, and a lot of people who made that decision said it's not always good to go with the cheaper option because you're not looking at, there's a reason why it's cheaper. There's different hazards that could be there. So I just want to make that comment. Yep. I think somebody over here.
Mike?
Had a question.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to bring it back around to sort of the apples and oranges comparison of the sort of widespread current TWMP requires around 1,800 systems on top of the hybrid system. So whatever numbers that Josh was quoting were just for the septic systems.
That's right.
Basically. And so, like Eastham basically has a cost analysis, and they went through the same process of looking at this. They started a little earlier. They were looking at IA systems because the EIA systems are only provisionally approved. So I don't know totally what the risk is here for the town to be requiring systems that are only provisionally approved by the state as for general use all over the town as a mandated upgrade. I think there's some liability on the town to do that because the language in provisional use certification is pretty specific that it's not intended for general use. Until it receives that, likely these will receive that. But just to sort of bring it back, one of the things that, they said, and this is a recent publication that Eastham had in their town meeting, was, who will install these and service these systems? And their answer was, practically speaking, it will be near impossible to install thousands of IA systems in Eastham, as well as in neighboring towns, in any orderly, timely, or cost-effective manner. And they have a cost evaluation over just 20 years of $140,000 per the cost to the median valued home of installing IA systems over 20 years would be $140,000. That's their number. And then for the cost per homeowner of a median home in Eastham is around $20,000 in, for the sewer system capital cost. So that's because it's spread throughout the entire tax base. And so when you start looking at these numbers and calculating the number of systems that you need in order to connect to a sewer compared to the number of systems that you need, the cost per homeowner goes up. And if you're looking at EIA systems like the TWMP previously was, or currently is, it has a layout of a map that says EIA, or nitrogen reduction required properties, and it's every single home inside the watershed plus the sewer system. Now, you might not need all of those, but in order to implement it the way that it was intended to be implemented, or it was sort of written to be implemented, there's no way to parse that out through using these sort of randomized triggers to get there. So I just think it's important just to look at the big picture here, like when we're evaluating the cost of these. First of all, it's apples to oranges because they're two different technologies. This is one of the other things that Eastham brought up is DEP is likely going to regulate for other contaminants in groundwater, and these systems only treat for nitrogen, the septic systems. If you're treating in a central location, then you're able to adapt that technology at the collection point, or at the ground discharge point, and treat for whatever emerging contaminants are regulated by DEP. So if DEP starts to regulate for PFAS or, you know, different types of pharmaceuticals or whatever is going on, you're going to have to address that again through individualized septic systems throughout the town, where adding that additional technology may not be possible or is extremely expensive again. And then in here, I just want to focus on, you know, Russ's nitrogen removing systems. He's got in here the capital cost and the operations and maintenance and what the average cost is over the 80 years is not included in there. The likelihood of, it is in here underneath, there's an asterisk, the cost of replacing a leaching area and a tank would add an additional $28,000 or something like that when you have to do that at some point, depending on the components in the ground. I know that there is some talk about these systems not having as much dissolved solids and not having failures in the leaching field, but everything's soil dependent on individual properties to determine how long a soil absorption system might last as well. So it gets complicated in the implementation of these systems, and I think that's going back to Barbara, what we're talking about in terms of like probably the next thing with the Board of Health regulations in terms of implementing the targeted watershed management plan, and what the board is looking to do if they're not looking to do this through triggers. And I think, you know, reading the DEP comments, it would make sense to move in that direction because they pretty much say that in the comments from DEP and from MEPA to move towards a proactive implementation and not a reactive one. So I just wanted to make those points, and maybe if you could talk about like what it's going to look like probably in comparison to the complications of implementing something like this compared to implementing a sewer system.
Very good discussion points. So my first recommendation for the town is to get the number for the full sewer system and use that to really come up with this comparative analysis. A couple good points were brought up, you know, the question of PFAS, phosphorus, pharmaceuticals, contaminants of emerging concern. That's a question that a lot of towns have made decisions on. The actual, okay, with the installations, so if we did a retrofit scenario where we go to an existing Title V system and install either a nitro or a nitrex system, you know, is the concern, what's the validity of the existing septic tank and the existing leach field or soil absorption system, and will that need to be replaced? Talked to, obviously, Mr. Lombardo, a few other colleagues that do a lot of septic tank design, and one consideration is if a tank is found in disarray or disrepair, you can always retrofit or replace that with a plastic-based tank. PVC and plastic-based tanks are going to have a life expectancy of likely well over 100 years. And looking at the same deal for the soil absorption system, if that does need to be replaced at a given time, the cost I put in here was $14,000 on $25 for either $14,000 if the septic tank needs to be replaced, or $14,000 if the soil absorption system needs to be replaced. Again, that's still on the conservative side. An average cost for installation of a new Title V system using Wellfleet's demographics between $25,000 and $30,000. Split the difference, roughly $28,000, $14,000 is where that number came from. Now, I did ask Mr. Lombardo, I'm looking at the physical pictures of the Nitrex that are provided. One question I had is I see a lot of plastic components, the tanks and everything. And I asked him, I said, if you can build that system exclusively, with either plastic-lined or plastic-based components, is that a possibility? And he replied back that yes, we're actually started looking at that last year to extend life expectancy and reduce the costs. But again, the reason why, Mike, I'm stalling a little bit on the answer is I really want to see the results of the full sewer analysis and to see what the cost is associated and where the discussion goes on there, because it may reduce just the areas where we're looking for EIAs or nitrogen reduction systems. But once we do have a definitive area, if the town moves in a direction to install nitrogen removing systems, the very first thing I would do, and I know anything I say, it's going to require someone at the town, some additional amount of labor or something to happen, but is if we have an area for nitrogen reduction systems, is to quantify, go to the Board of Health and get the records, see which systems are, say, less than 10 years old, less than 20 years old, look and see if there is adequate spacing between the septic tank and the soil absorption system to make sure that the new components will physically fit in there. And that would be referred, a desktop analysis. Once we get a feeling that these sites may work, we'd want to do a physical site. Go look at there, see if there's landscaping, hardscape, electrical. You see all the things that drive the price way up. And then to physically inspect the existing Title V septic tank. You can go down with a GoPro on a camera, turn it around. What you're looking for is deterioration, cracks in the settling tank, things like that. There is the presence of hydrogen sulfide, likely not in the quantities where you're going to see heavy deterioration. A lot of times if you go into sewer manholes or sewer wet wells, you can see super aggressive corrosion where the raw aggregate of the concrete is sticking out. So you'd want to do a condition assessment of the existing tank, but if that looks to be in good, sound working order, the leach field is working at the time, that might be a candidate for a retrofit. Because there are a lot of disclaimers and we haven't been out to individual sites looking at it, the retrofit cost was creeping up on almost the cost of a new construction system. Because the cost of the retrofit components, I believe are roughly around $24,000, $25,000 just to buy the physical tanks. So then you have to do the installations, and I totally appreciate Wellfleet's a tight-knit community, and everybody knows somebody with maybe this guy, so-and-so can come help and put it in, but from a planning level number, I don't want to use to be, too aggressive on what may or may not actually happen. So just the material costs are $24,000, $25,000 to buy on an individual purchase. If the town does move in a direction where there's 50 or 100 of these, I'm sure there can be a way to procure these in a more economical fashion. But again, until we get that full layout with the sewer and we make that decision, that's really going to drive a lot of the next decisions that we make. Good news is go ahead.
I just, and this really isn't totally, it's related, but not totally related to how we're going to go forward. You're talking about plastic systems, and they could be cheaper, last 100 years. Don't plastics still let off PFAS?
I was waiting for that question.
Okay,
too.
thank you. All right, so it's not an off-the-wall question. So in a sense, if you're using this cheaper, more durable 100 years, we're looking at 100 years where we're adding, somehow flushing more PFAS
Some towns do.
into the harbor or whatever water system this is going to end up in.
If it's shown and determined that there is a leachate coming from these systems, then that could be an issue in the future.
Yeah.
I do know of one town on the Cape that does not allow the use of PVC water pipes, which I find ironic because the service pipes are all plastic, and that's the last thing that comes into the house. But I've heard that brought up before, and it's another a point of consideration moving forward. And again, if we look at a full sewer layout, now, same thing with low-pressure sewers, are all PVC pipes, and the grinder pumps are in PVC or plastic-based components.
Right. So to me, and that is going to be an issue down the road. I mean, it's not our issue right now, but it will be an issue down the road. And if this is the system, if these are the components there, we're being forced to, we shouldn't be, so that's an argument down for another day.
Yeah.
But how can we be held accountable? Because there will be a time they'll say you got too much PFAS, or how are we going to clean up the PFAS and you're going to contribute? Well, we did this because you were telling us to use these systems.
Correct. It's Mass
Is that
DEP
bad,
approves plastic. Every one of these wastewater systems we're putting in, no matter what we do, is going to have plastic and PVC.
I know.
Based
I know.
on it.
And I'm learning that with the Barnstable one as well.
Do we know whether PVC emits PFAS?
System.
Because not all plastics do, I don't think.
I cannot give you a definitive answer right now. I can certainly look into it.
I think we'd have to get those questions answered, so in order to move forward, because otherwise it sounds like a very attractive alternative. What I wanted to ask too is, assuming, and it certainly looks to me as though, once the study is done, I'm personally kind of confident that we're going to find that sewering with the largest possible sewer district that's practical is going to be the best answer and minimize the amount of reliance on NR systems. That said, in terms of considering the cost to the town and the taxpayers, we've been discussing, and I know, Josh, you brought this up, about amortizing the cost of NR systems that have to be put in through the town because the town has better purchasing power vis-a-vis the contractors and so on. So ultimately, that aggregate cost, I think, is going to have to be stacked up against the cost of just going with NR systems.
Correct. We want to look at both of those. And the way to make this truly most economical for all the residents, regardless if we did 100% sewer or 100% nitrogen removing, whatever that cost is, that capital cost to install that should be borne by all the residents of the town, because clean water is something that we all enjoy. Several of the other communities are also performing in that manner on the Cape, and that will yield you the most. And that ties into one of the major questions or the comments from the submitted plan is how do we make this more equitable? I believe that was the intent of the original TWMP, is that whatever the cost for the EZI is supposed to be shared with the entire town.
Yep.
But I can understand, confusion or, the concern of residents when they have to do it now because of, whatever the reasons are. Yeah.
Josh?
Yeah, I think the intent going forward in the next revision is to make it more equitable. We're in a sticky quagmire at the moment where we have found that decisions have been made where it's not as equitable as it can be. But, what John's referred to in a few meetings is essentially some type of decentralized sewer district, decentralized wastewater district. Gloucester has the best precedent for this, where they installed step systems, but they paid for it, they manage it, they own it, even though it's on private property. I think the proposal, this DSD proposal, is really a contingency if we can't solve this with sewer. And it sounds to me like the board is starting to move in this direction of let's try to solve this with sewer. But if we can't, we would want to institute some type of municipally led project that identified the homes that needed the most corrective action the soonest and bid them out as a collective. There's a long tail of complications with that as well, so I don't want people to think that this is like a silver bullet, right? We have to acquire easements, we need to engineer many different types of homes and where they're sited, so this is not simpler, but it is certainly more equitable to distribute the hard money cost of whatever we need to do with septic across the entire tax base, as opposed to what we currently have, which is an acute, oftentimes six-figure burden on individual homeowners. And I know that we're also here to have a conversation with the board on seeing if we can, revise regulations a little bit to maybe take some pressure off of a trigger system, and giving the board confidence that the select board and the sewer commissioners are very focused on solving this problem with more of a global approach.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I think Mr.
Okay. Ryan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do as well. So, sorry, I'm talking on the microphone. I'm used to having it right in front of me, so. So you've done work with a lot of different towns in your capacity. What is the installer and manufacturer capacity to deliver these systems at any sorts of scale? You have two fairly small manufacturers, which is, Clean 2 and what's the other one? Something. Clean 2's really small though, and they have less than 50 systems in the ground currently. So what is the capacity both of the manufacturers as well as the local installers to install basically 150 systems a year plus? Is that even realistic?
And also the engineers that have to design all these things as well. So I do have plenty of experience in other towns, but not with the EIAs, specifically nitro and nitrex. What I would say with the other towns, though, is we still saw supply chain issues with things as simple as pipe, for example, especially during the pandemic. That was really, really challenging. For that one, I'd have to reach out directly to Nitro and give a theoretical, hey, if someone wanted to order 500 of these, how long would it take you? And it's a real question, because if we're going to focus the results on a nitro or a nitrex, we need to know over a 5-year period, if we have to put this many in, is that doable? So that would be a direct question, which I'm happy to follow up with these entities on. The next question is, from a design standpoint, are the engineers available to do it? In the world of engineering, the infrastructure boom on Cape Cod has attracted more engineering firms on the Cape. Can they totally keep up with the demand? I would say right now there's still a little bit of backlog. I know in Orleans there's a lot. Our firm typically does straight municipal engineering. We're bantering, taking on just for the sewer connections, because it really does kind of play into the, if you don't have that last connection, you can't start taking the nitrogen out of the ground there. But there is a backlog too with the engineering firms. I mean, 1 or 2 or 5 might not be a big deal, but all of a sudden if you need 500 of them, it would have to be coordinated and spaced out. And if there was going to be a mass implementation, my advice to the town would be to pick 4 to 7 qualified engineering firms that do this, have a meeting with representatives from each one and say, how do we make this work? You're going to be getting a lot of these, and how do we streamline it? Think of Henry Ford and the assembly line, right? Once you can figure that process out, you can start to make this happen. And then the last one was the contractors. So it depends what certifications the town's going to require the contractor to have. If these are funded through any type of state funds or municipal funds, there may be certain certifications that the contractors may need to have, which would reduce your contracting pool. If it's just local contractors that say don't need a DCAM certification or these other certifications, then that will open the pool up a little bit. But if these systems take, a few weeks or a month to install, and we have to put in X amount, 100 of them, and there's only so many contractors, I can only I would see the price going up. It's supply and demand.
Even if you've gotten a sort of economy of scale,
Right.
Just by waiting, it's going to...
And if you want something sooner than later, of course you can do it, but you may have to pay double or triple.
You'll have to bring contractors from off Cape.
Potentially.
It'd be almost inevitable.
And that probably wouldn't be cost effective for someone for a tie. We would want to work with the core group that is on this area and work with them.
Yeah, I got it just to the contractor side. When I sold my business, it was a commercial system put in the ground. Sent out 4 plans, got back 2. Price range $65,000 to $130,000. So the contractors and the installers are going to be the problem down here because you're running out of them. A lot of them are retiring, and you're not going to find the qualified help to do the jobs down here. If you have to put in that amount of systems in the ground, it's not going to be done anytime soon. And my system was just standard. It was a pressure dose system, so it was easy, but overall, I got back 2 quotes when I sent out 4 plans. That's the problem we're going to have down here.
Tom, did you?
Yeah.
Mr. Kleekamp was.
Just very briefly, and if I will, again, that's why it really comes back to getting this final analysis with the sewer, because if we determine a lot of this discussion may be a moot point if the number drops significantly.
Well, my point, Mr. Chairman, was I think we are at a point a few minutes ago that we could segue into working with the health board on where we want to take the discussion, unless there are a lot of more questions for Mr. Kleekamp. The health board's, it's been an hour, and I think we need to try to move that discussion to the Board of Health.
Just want to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this report, and it was just tremendously helpful in clarifying next steps, so I just want to thank you.
Very welcome.
It was an enjoyable read, actually.
This is the first time I've had three say it's actually enjoyable on an engineering report. There's-
Well, it was clarifying and interesting. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Do we have an idea of when we're going to get that number for the, Anastasia's working on that now, correct?
Soon. I have physically seen the model on a shared computer screen. I know it's in the works soon, and I've been quietly
Stay tuned.
asking, yes.
I think a month, 2 months? Do we have any ballpark?
I'll bring it up. Let me
yeah.
try to contact
She's on the
Anastasia
line?
before I speak for or unless she's on the line.
Yeah, she is online.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Anastasia.
Hello, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. We do anticipate submitting that within a month.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
So, I think Michael and Ryan could kind of give the intro as to where we are, and we can move forward, or Mr. Grandland as the chair, and John, not trying to upset anyone, I'm just trying to figure, people that have been involved with this stuff as much, and, but however the discussion needs to go, but there, we certainly need to find a bridge between the current regulatory scheme that is in place while we kind of move forward toward the full plan on sewering, in whatever maturation that comes out of. So I think this is what this part of the meeting is for, is to have that discussion and see if there's some areas that we can take a look at the current regs and perhaps flex them a bit to give the homeowners a little bit of a break between now and when we actually have DEP signed off and everybody's ready to go on this.
Yeah, I'd agree that there's a certain amount of urgency to getting some sense of how soon we can address this regulatory issue.
So,
Okay, yeah, Mike, the only question that that's gonna just haunt me slightly, we don't have a health agent right at this moment. You know, I tried to rely, and we relied on Heath to get the questions that we needed answered for us. I don't know, if we kick back all the regulations or move something back at this moment, should this be the venue that do it, or should be at our own Board of Health meeting, which is tomorrow?
it should be at your Board of Health meeting.
That's where I'm gonna go with that. So right at this moment, we'll look at and we'll hear all the arguments that we have tonight. But we will not, as far as I'm concerned with the board, we will probably not vote on anything to change any type of regulations this evening.
Yep.
But we will address some things tomorrow at our own meeting.
Right.
Okay? So, yes, Mike, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, just to clarify, the reason why these are here, I spoke to Josh and thought that it might be helpful to just sort of see if the select board is sort of on board with the framework of some regulation revisions that I drafted, and then to bring that to the Board of Health. But this is solely for discussion purposes and also for tomorrow night's meeting, solely for discussion purposes. I just want to sort of get the general framework out there, see if the board is agreeable to that framework of what I've basically proposed to the Board of Health. Basically, the MIPA comments came back in, and the Secretary's certificate and Mass DEP comments call for the town to clarify how it will transition away from a reactive strategy, sales failures, in addition to an intentional enforceable framework that delivers verifiable nitrogen reductions tied to phased implementation. And so what I did was I think that hearing everything tonight and understanding, you know, what I proposed while I was still on the select board about targeting implementation and what the board seems to be moving towards, if we're going to be using these EIA systems, it would be towards going towards a targeted phased approach. Until we have a watershed permit, that's when the clock starts ticking as far as our 20-year time frame. And so the purpose of those regulations is really to roll back the trigger approach of those particular triggers, but to also ensure that any new system that goes in the ground while all the planning is taking place about where it's going to get sewered and how much sewering is going to take place, that any new system that goes in the ground has to be retrofit ready, installed retrofit ready, and not only that, but with an administrative consent order attached to it with an enforceable action. So if it's determined at any point that that property is in an area that is going to be required for upgrade under the Targeted Watershed Management Plan or the permit, that system's retrofit ready with engineering already in place to drop in those components. And that engineering would have to be in place to drop in a system that I had set here, and we'll be discussing this at under 13 milligrams per liter. Part of the issue with the current regulations is in the definition of enhanced nitrogen removal technology. It listed as systems performing at a level of 10 milligrams per liter or under. And currently there's only one system that actually performs at that level, certified by Mass DEP. And so I know from speaking with engineers that they are not comfortable designing a system that performs at 11 because it's just not supported by the regulations. So I did call around to other towns. A lot of them are just using general use. Very few towns are requiring upgrades of provisional use systems at all. There is Tisbury. They're not a nitrogen sensitive area yet. And they're doing it in a very specific area around Lake Tashmoo. And then there's Wellfleet. And then Falmouth has plans to do it, but they have not begun implementing anything. They're waiting for their full sewer layout. So currently, there are engineers that are designing the nitro system in Wellfleet, but there are definitely engineers who do not feel comfortable doing that because it's not supported in the regulatory framework as far as they read it, and as far as I read it also, because there's only one organization certifying the nitrogen effluent that I know of and granting a certification. That's DEP, and the DEP is got one system that's 10 and under, and that's the Nitrex system, which happens to be the most expensive system. But just moving on from there, basically, there's a few revisions to the definitions in order to bring it back into compliance with what's proposed here. And then other than that, it requires any new system to go on the ground to be retrofit ready with the engineering and that administrative consent order that I talked about. It adds some variances to the previous 2017 regulations. And basically in the ACO, it would require that if the property is designated for upgrade under the approved Targeted Watershed Management Plan or watershed permit, the system shall be upgraded to include such technology within 2 years of written notice by the Board of Health or in accordance with a coordinated phased upgrade schedule established under the applicable plan or permit. So that would fall under that. So basically, it's a two-phase thing. If you guys don't act as a select board to implement some kind of phase-targeted approach, the Board of Health can act and say you have 2 years to upgrade. And that just sort of gives this sort of pressure relief on, we do not want these systems, in my opinion, going in the ground where we're going to be running sewer mains. It's just not supported by any other community that's doing this. Once they've decided to sewer an area, they are, first of all, you're getting a net nitrogen reduction loss because they don't perform as well as a sewer system, but also the expense of running a sewer main by a house and not requiring that house to connect drives up the cost of the system per household. So I can't really, so that's why that's set like that. But then in areas that fall out of that, and if they are required for EIA systems and for future proofing, if at any point there needs to be EIA systems, there is space between the septic tank and the leaching component, the soil absorption system, in order to install that stuff. And other towns are doing that. Falmouth has that right now in place. You have to have space between the tank and the leach field. They don't require an ACO. There's no enforceable action. But I do want to have that in there as a way for DEP to see that we're not backing away from making any progress, that there's an enforceable action attached to any system that's going in the ground, as well as the engineering. So, and also save homeowners money by having that engineering done. Doesn't cost much more to get a nitro system or nitrex system designed by the engineer. But if you have to design a Title V system and then go back to the engineer when you're required for an upgrade and have it redesigned, that's going to cost you the same thing over again. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of, you're going to have the engineering anyways. This gives you the opportunity to not have to go back and re-engineer and do things twice. So that's basically the framework of the regulations. They're based on the previous set of regulations, 2017. I found it really complicated to try and roll back the triggers and redline through the 2025 regulations. So I went back to 2017 and where we didn't have those triggers, and then amended those regulations to support an adaptable framework. And right in here, I can't find exactly where it is. But in the purpose, it states these interim regulations may be amended as needed upon approval of the town's Target Watershed Management Plan or watershed permit. And so the whole intent here is to bring this into a adaptable framework where we're still making some progress and still having IA systems required in the conservation zones. Yeah.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that, and I appreciate that it is difficult when you have multiple versions of regulations to try to create one clear thing to view. But I think since it's the triggers that are really have been the subject of discussion with the members of the public and among the boards, I think at some point it would be useful to just have some list of what are the triggers that were implemented in the most recent amendments, and then of those, what are we looking to retract? So maybe not right now, but I think really the triggers do need to be discussed at some point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the idea would be like if these came into a draft form to be voted on or into a public hearing, it would probably have the other regulations redlined through.
Right.
So everyone can see what the regulations are currently, and then these would be the proposed regulations to be basically redlined and then dropped in. There's just, I think that's the best way to go, personally, is to show that and show the two things. We could bring these things back into play if they're ever needed. I don't foresee that, given the conversation that's taking place amongst the board and where the town is considering going as far as implementing these things, but the option would exist to, if the select board failed to create some kind of framework that was like acceptable to the Board of Health, that the Board of Health would be able to act and bring back these, but with the financial support that I think is necessary to roll that out. I just don't think that's there at this point.
So through the chair, may I follow up? Okay,
No.
then maybe I misunderstand, but I thought the next step was going to be for your board to
Discuss
look
these.
at potential revisions to the most recent regulations. So doesn't that include discussing the triggers, regardless of where the select board thinks we should be going ultimately with the sewer? Doesn't that need to be?
Yes.
Well, I think at our meeting tomorrow.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We will probably be discussing some of these triggers.
Okay.
There are a lot of the triggers in here that I did not completely agree with, but we will be going forward. I don't know if it'll be done tomorrow.
Sure.
It may take us a short time, but we're waiting for the plan for you. But we will work on our section to look at all the triggers that we do have, and if they need to be adjusted, we will do that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Josh?
Yeah, this is just what I've proposed, is a strike through of the 2025 regulations and to bring back 2017. That was was in the letter from the select board. But to amend these so that we're still making sure that that we're addressing the nitrogen problems and tying into the targeted watershed management plan, a framework to move forward. But that's just my proposal. We haven't discussed this as a board. In fact, this is my first meeting. This is also Sarah's first meeting as a Board of Health member, so.
Chair, one thing we didn't do is just introduce all of ourselves. So any interest in just board members introducing themselves?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay,
We're going to start here? Okay, you first.
who are you?
Ryan Curley. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Sheila Lyons, Select Board.
Yeah, Barbara Carboni, Select Board.
Josh Eston, Select Board.
And John Wolf, Select Board. And just to clarify, Sheila is our vice chair, I'm the chair, and Josh is the clerk.
Okay. I know who you are.
Casey Schmidt, Board of Health. This is my second meeting.
Michael DeVasto, Board of Health, first meeting.
Sarah Blandford, Board of Health, my first meeting.
Kenneth Granlund, the chair. It's been lots of meetings. Lots of meetings.
Is Katie here too?
Is Katie, you online? No. We had one meeting, wow.
Well, welcome to the new members,
Yes.
and thank you for stepping up.
If I may, who's chairing this section of the meeting? Just for clarification, is it still you, Mr. Chair,
I
or?
think it'd probably be me that'd
Okay.
be taking care of this
Yeah.
on our side.
So, Mr. Chair, I have a comment. I would want to dissuade the idea that we'll have a targeted watershed management plan approved by the DEP within a couple of months or anything of that sort. There are substantial revisions that need to happen for the DEP to review it or approve it, and it will likely have multiple revisions going forward. It's not, we've submitted it. They have a lot of issues with what was submitted. There has to be substantial changes. Those changes are going to take time, and they're going to review those changes and then, again, provide comment back. So, this is not going to be something that we have tomorrow. It's going to be months, if not much longer than that, so.
Well, what we're hoping for in our meeting tomorrow, maybe get some idea where we're going to be going. The administrative consent orders are going to be used. I don't know where the board will want to go tomorrow. I know where I will want to be going tomorrow, but all we can do is work at this and try to work at this together.
Can
Josh.
can I speak?
I think Ken's can
Go
chair
ahead,
it from here
Casey.
on.
Go ahead.
So I think what I'm hearing you say, Ryan, is that you would like us to have some kind of interim plan in place while we await approval from DEP.
I think, well, at the very least, until DEP approves what's there, but there is, even after that, there will still be decision points that will have to be made. If we do have a reliance on these systems, how are we implementing them? And I mean, some of that will be accomplished in the target watershed management plan, but some of it won't. So, yeah.
So you're advising us not to wait on that and to act so that we can get things together and have it be implementable in the state that it is now while we await the target
Yes.
watershed management plan? Okay.
Josh, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Mike for putting the hard yards on getting this new draft. I think in principle, I'm very much in support of it. I have a few comments that just the Board of Health might want to consider in your deliberations. I brought this up a number of years ago, and I haven't been dissuaded from moving on this position, that I do think that anything above and beyond state standards should only be within the watershed itself, which is about 80% of the town. But there is about 20% of the town that is outside of this, the watershed, so it's not going to be contributing to the nitrogen load in the harbor, and it's not going to be measured by DEP. And the reason why I'm advocating for this is simply to relieve the pressure on the service providers of these systems, whatever they may be. I think we're hearing that there's already constraints of people installing systems, more advanced systems. And so if we can reduce that number to only the essential number, I think that might be something to consider. I think I'm becoming more comfortable with ACOs. I was at first just seeing how individuals have reacted to being asked to sign an ACO. It becomes a pretty big decision to enter into a contract with a municipality that you're tied to. But I do appreciate, one, the need to have a contingency, if the TWMP doesn't address the need for septic. And two, I think it is showing good faith to the state that we are not backtracking. We're just trying to find a different avenue to find the same solution. So I think that's fine, in my personal opinion. There was one small comment around, I think it was on page 11, where it just says systems installed that achieve less than 13 milligrams per liter may be eligible for financial assistance from the town of Wellfleet. I'm not sure. Maybe possibly this should be included in regulations. I think that anything that's ephemeral that may or may not be voted at town meeting for the following year should be kind of kept on a fact sheet and not necessarily in regulation. So just something that I caught that the board might want to consider. And then, but in large part, I think this conversation has all thankfully gone in the same direction, at least on the side of the board, that we are looking for partnership with the Board of Health to roll back these triggers, put some type of assurance in place that if they do eventually have to upgrade to an EINA system, that we have that in place, but to not burden the homeowner with that cost immediately while we try to understand and figure out the larger plan that hopefully will reduce everything with the most minimal impact to the individual homeowner. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheila?
I agree with everything that has been, I agree with everything that's been said, and for me, I do feel that there was a lot of misinformation that was coming through to Heath, and are contradictory or confusing, and that led him to really feel that these had to be implemented, and I think those signals came from DEP. However, you do have obligations and you have regulations that you have to stand by. And I think that whatever was in place in 2017, your septic system fails, you're putting on a bedroom, those types of things those are natural things that everybody knows you're going to have to do something with your septic unless you're adding on your fourth bedroom and you're set up for a 4-bedroom septic. So I don't have a problem with that, and with the anticipation that those are going to change once we know what we're going to do. And even then, they might not have to be implemented until we know what the sewer is accomplishing. And if it's accomplishing all our hopes and dreams and cleaning up things even at a faster rate and at a better rate, we can kind of put some of those offline and not have to make everyone upgrade. I mean, this is the way I understood this bill when it first was presented, and I think that's all I wanted to say as far as comments for your deliberation tomorrow as well.
Mike, you had your hand up. You have something else?
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember what I was going to say. It was something Sheila had just mentioned.
It was about maybe the bedroom or the, some kind of.
Oh, yeah,
those
what I
were
was
the
just going to
natural
say, what I was
triggers
going to
that are
say,
sort of built
it's
into
kind of
boards
misleading to
health.
call these the 2017 regulations because they
Yeah.
were like updated in between those, but
In
these are the
between, right.
regulations that were in place up until January 20th,
Right.
2025. So
Right.
these are the previous set of
Yes,
regulations.
and everybody knows what those are. I
Yeah,
think.
okay.
Okay.
But I just want to clarify for anybody who thinks we're like rolling back to a previous set that was in 2017.
Thank you for clarifying
This
that.
should be called the 2024 regulations, I guess,
Yeah,
but,
or
or 20.
2025.
Yeah, whatever you want to call them. Right now, they're currently the proposed amendments, septic regulations, proposed septic regulations.
Right.
And this is literally the first time that we've discussed this, that it's been presented in public. It's only my proposal. The rest of the board is going to have weigh in on this. And I just wanted to have some understanding about whether this is, first of all, before we go tomorrow, is this something that is supported with the direction that's the select board's moving towards, prior to us going into deliberations? Because I think it's very important, because this is just a quick point, is the Board of Health has jurisdiction over septic systems in Title V, but the town of Wellfleet has jurisdiction over the Targeted Watershed Management Plan and its implementation, and everything that is decided on the Targeted Watershed Management Plan has to be approved by the Select Board. And so what we have in this situation is really cross-jurisdiction or overlapping jurisdiction. So it's very important to coordinate, I think, between these two bodies moving forward. And I think if you look at other towns and the models that they've used, that's how it's been done. And typically through an intermediary like implementation task force or some sort of body where sort of collaboration can happen and then bring things to both boards. But I have talked to health agents across the Cape in nitrogen-sensitive areas and wastewater directors, and the running theme there is the Board of Health is not driving the bus on the Targeted Watershed Management Plan. Once you submit a Targeted Watershed Management Plan and a notice of intent to get a watershed permit, you are exempt from the nitrogen reduction septic regulations, and then that Targeted Watershed Management Plan, which eventually becomes a watershed permit, if it's approved, will dictate your strategy to remove nitrogen. So the CMR requiring upgrades to nitrogen reduction or best available nitrogen reduction technology is a stick from DEP to get towns to submit a plan. And even in their own frequently asked questions, it addresses this. It says, upgrading everyone's septic system could be extremely costly to homeowners. Why isn't Mass DEP requiring towns to submit a targeted watershed management plan or a comprehensive wastewater management plan? And their answer is, we don't have the regulatory authority to compel towns to submit a plan. So we are regulating through Title V.
Right.
And so it's not that they don't want towns to do a watershed management plan, it's that they can't compel them to. And so in order to compel them, they gave us a big stick.
Right.
And so, yeah, just some points that I just wanted to bring up, I guess. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Russ, I want to thank you personally for being here tonight.
Welcome.
It was good. Yes, John?
I think
We'll have to have you around a lot.
I think we're,
Happy to come back.
excuse me. I think we were planning to open this for public questions and comments. Would you like to do
Well,
that?
if you'd like to open up, that's, sure, we can answer a few, somebody wants to ask a few questions.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
just have one question.
Yes.
Do you have what you need in terms of guidance from the board that you were seeking, or do you have any other questions for us at this moment?
That's a good one. In the past, we would have relied on the health agent, but right now, we're going to have to rely on ourselves and the information that we have to move forward with this. Is there anything you can send us, guidelines that you think should be thinking about? Please send it to us. You just get it to Jen, and then we'll take it all under advisement.
Sure.
So, Jen, is there anybody who wants to ask a question?
Want to start within the room?
Sure, please identify yourself and what is your question?
Good evening. Thank you, chairs. My name is Tim Sayre. A few questions, if you don't mind. One is, once we have a watershed management plan, my understanding is that we have 20 years on that portion of it, and we only need to meet 70% of the guidelines. Is that correct?
75.
75 now? Okay. And to meet that 75, the suggested sewage right now, not IAs, with just a small increase in that, would meet that 75%. Is that correct?
Not exactly.
Okay, that's why I'm asking.
It's per watershed. And so every single watershed sub-abatement with a TMDL has to achieve that 75% reduction in that watershed. Some of them don't need a big reduction like Hatches Creek, but Logie Bay needs a substantial reduction, and so does Blackfish Creek, and Drummer Cove also has a TDML that leads a very significant reduction in those areas. And so you would have to, here's the good thing though, the DEP accepts the credit for the reduction upon connection. So you just need to have enough connections within that time frame of 20 years. And so Eastham, I think their schedule is they're supposed to start construction next year. They estimated their first phase would be like completed in 2 years. I'm not so sure about that, but that was their sort of like hopes, I think. And then they're planning to have their other phase 2, somewhere around 10 years from that point. So they're treating, I think, somewhere around in phase 1 and phase 2, 1,800 properties or maybe 2,000 properties. I can't remember exactly. Somewhere around the same number that we would have to treat to meet the TMDLs. But the layout's going to be a little different for us. But as long as you have the connections for the 75% of reductions in each sub-abatement, then you can go. But you're good to go. But the maps will really dictate that, how easy it's going to be to get to those sub-abatements, because you don't necessarily have to go down Old Wharf Road, but you have to be in that watershed, you know, so.
Well, I appreciate that clarification. Second portion is, now you've met, you have 20 years to meet the 75%. Then we get an additional 20 years to meet the other 25%, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Also want to state that according to things I've read, and this is from Unibel, and I've shared the link with John, he can share it with the committees. No PFABs are produced by PVC production or use of PVC. PVC is estimated to last between 75 and over 100 years in use as sewage pipe and as water delivery pipe. So you have that, and we've had people up here stating that it's only 30 years, and that's accepted by the EPA, and better than that, it's accepted by the state of California, who we all know likes to put a tag on everything. Thank you. Appreciate the time, and I appreciate the explanation.
Anybody else have any questions? Anybody online, John?
I don't see anybody online.
Okay. Well, we must all.
I got one more question.
Yes, Josh, go ahead.
You brought up a really good point, Mr. Chair, that you currently don't have a health agent to support you. Mr. Town Administrator, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know there was a conversation around if you weren't able to quickly fill the role, that we could explore an interim health agent. Do we have any resources from the state that we could give the Board of Health in order to support them on any technical questions they might have?
From the state?
Possibly.
Give me a day.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for everyone who's here, let me tell you where we are with the health recruitment. We went through one round. We had 4 or 5 applicants. We went to interview 4, 2 dropped. The 2 folks that we did interview were good people, and we've encouraged them to reapply, but we didn't have what we felt was enough of a critical mass, A, to make a good decision, and B, we would like to see a little more meat on the bones on some of the resumes that we've seen.
Tom, I was asked to be on the
Yeah.
committee. I work for a living, so anytime, I would love to be on it, if you can getting some new people in to interview. Anytime after 3:30, and that's when I'll be available to sit down and talk
Very
to
good.
people.
Okay, excellent.
Or possibly somebody else on the Board of Health will
Yep.
also be there. Okay?
Good. Thank you very much.
We have Kurt Felix would like to ask a question. Kurt, can you hear us?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the question basically is for Josh. Josh, you said that basically to go with 2,250 septic systems, if we were to upgrade that number, using the numbers I think that Russ had presented, the total cost would be between 235 and 270 million for total. I'm just trying to understand how you came up with those. Then I have a question for Russ as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 234 number came if we installed, so I broke out into two buckets. It's hard to tell how much we're going to have nitro versus nitrex, but in this scenario, I looked at, if we took nitrex and we looked at what the installation cost estimates would be per Mr. Kleekamp's report, 20 years of monitoring, and life cycle costs of that system. And then we looked at the number of systems that would be required at 10 milligrams a liter at the current total nitrogen reduction that is required per the TWMP. We get to 2,250 systems in 20 years. And so I took that cost and then amortized it out over 20 years. And I'm happy to share the spreadsheet with you, and if you have a different way to come to this number, I'm more than happy to be corrected. But yeah, I'm looking at the base cost of a system times the number of systems needed over time. Gets to $234,980,597 for nitrex, and that's assuming that we have about a 13% new system and a 87% retrofit. And then if you look at the nitro system, because it has a higher life cycle cost, that blended ratio of that 13% to 87%, you're looking at $270,194,277. And, these are estimated numbers, but that's how I arrived to it.
Yeah, it comes to 112,500 per septic. So the question I have for Russ is, the table shows an 80-year life cycle cost of $18,771 for nitrex and $55,944 for nitro, and I don't see how you came up with that.
So, good question, Mr. Felix. That was provided by Pio Lombardo in a life cycle cost analysis, and I actually asked him that exact question in a follow-up email. It's a little bit different of a processes, but I do have a response I can forward to the board about that. So that was provided by Lombardo Associates.
So it's not based on anything that you developed?
No, say that one more time, sir.
So it's not anything based on something that you developed, it was strictly from his memo?
Correct. Yep, as part of the peer review, I was strictly looking at information provided.
Terrific. The other question I have is on O&M. The test center is offered to provide O&M for the town under an RME contract, and I don't see anywhere any numbers that are being tossed around consideration of that, or a refinement of what that might look like. The other thing too is that I think once these systems get to provisional and once there's a certain number, DEP will probably allow sampling. So when you're taking a 3250 number and assuming every system has to do that for the next 20 years, I did see some decrement in one of your sheets as I quickly looked through it. But, as these systems get sensorized and as that capability is available to system operators online, like it is for current wastewater systems, sewer systems, one would expect that those costs would get very, very low, not be anywhere near these kind of numbers. So I'm wondering what kind of consideration you have included in your analysis, especially on O&M, to look at those factors.
Good questions. So yes, the cost presented within the report is inclusive of the initial 3 years, and it was stated by Lombardo Associates that after those 3 years, those prices do go down. And correct, if it moves from provisional to general use, there may be a reduced requirement for longer-term O&M. But again, until I see a formal proposal from Mass TC or Mass something, I'm putting myself in the role of a public citizen at town meeting, saying, explain this to me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I need it to be explained to myself better with kind of some more broken out detail for those exact costs. So I did carry that $1,000 per year contingency. The second part of your question relates to I believe, how is this, as technology improves with remote sensing and things like that. While it is true these systems can be installed with a alarm system that will alert the operator if if power is lost, things like that. We're still a little ways from remote nitrogen sensing, and the last remote nitrogen sensor that I looked at, it was around 2015 or 2016, was on the realm of $15,000 for just the sensor at a treatment facility. So if the thought is we can remote nitrogen sample, and check it out through our app, like our solar panels generating power, I still think we're a little ways away from that. And if we are to use that as conclusive, it will get better, this price will come down, and we can fall back. I just don't have enough substance to say, yes, that we can rely on that at this moment of time. Will we get there in 10 years?
Yes.
Quite frankly, we can, but.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't imagine, there's really not good nitrogen sensing that's inexpensive. My comment was more geared toward systems that I currently work with that are remote sensored, and you get pressures, you get temperatures, you get flows, you get all the basic parameters that you need to understand that the system is operating as designed. And I think, one of the things that has been happening, especially with the enhanced IAs, is over time those systems have been getting better and more efficient, lower cost and more nitrogen removal. But, at the end of the day, when people are going out to do the monitoring, the quote unquote maintenance, operations and maintenance, it's sending a physical body out to the location and seeing if the system's operating according to standard. There is some level of, I don't know what the level of nitrogen sampling will be going forward from DEP on approved systems, but that's a whole different kettle of fish. My comment was mainly, sort of wondering to what extent you're taking into consideration the fact that you can do sensorizing and, get the cost of sending a person out to the location down, which is a big part of that $3,200.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Mike, I'm going to go to John first. Yeah. Yes, John, go ahead.
Yeah, just in regards to, projecting the possibility of reducing monitoring costs, we have to be cautious. The operative word here is may. I'm always nervous when I hear that word because may not is the other side of it. So.
One for you, Mr. Chair, if I can follow up briefly on that comment. So there's if these systems do get bumped into general use and the monitoring requirements do go down, one of the conversations I had with Scott Horsley, and the thought is that the town is going to be required to have what I'm guessing, a contract operator for your 95 Lawrence Hill. The town, all of your scenarios include a treatment facility and sewer pipes, meaning it's either going to be town staff or contract ops, one or the other. If it goes the direction of contract ops and your treatment plant has a laboratory, which, the treatment plants do need to do certified nitrogen samples, is to have that operator or that group that you hire, whether Weston and Sampson, Woodard and Curran, Veolia, these operators that do this, if we start with a small amount of nitrogen removing systems, if there's 20, 30, 50, and each one has to be sampled or there's a rotational sampling protocol, is to have your operators that are up to see if we can work out with these op companies. So there are things we can do in the future to reduce these costs and think outside of the box and, like you said, make this work. But again, until we get to that conversation and that discussion and get some definitive answers about that, that's why I'm just carrying a higher planning number. If Nitro and Nitrex get approved for general use, these numbers will come down. And at the 5-year point of this adaptive management plan, that's when we can reconsider this and reevaluate. And that's another key thing to remember, is this is meant to be reevaluated every 5 years. We know things are going to change in the future. We know technology is going to get better. We just want to make sure that the town is not putting themselves in a position where they have to duplicate work.
Thank you. All right, Mike, you got one more comment?
Yeah, just basically, it picks up on what Russ just said, that the state, under a watershed permit, is going to require QAP monitoring, and it's systematic monitoring and data collection on a town level that requires an additional amount of O&M. That we don't know what the extent of that will be, because we're the only town pursuing this level of hybrid EIA and reliance. I'll call it over-reliance on EIA systems. It's just the actual complexity of implementing and monitoring and installing these systems at a level of in the thousands in order to meet the requirements by DEP, I think is fairly high risk, especially when you have systems where there's only 50 installed or under that right now, and we're banking everything on their long-term performance. Right. And DEP has said we are going to evaluate the long-term performance of these in the ground as an aggregate for crediting you. And so when I spoke to someone at DEP, I spoke to Andrew Osei, he said that in a way that made me believe that he was saying, just because it's 10 doesn't mean you're going to get 10. This is a risk that falls on the town in the hopes that you're going to get 10. Maybe they're performing better under ideal circumstances in testing facilities, but we don't care about that. You're going to be basically getting what your long-term performance is over time, and that's going to be how you're credited. And if it falls short of a TMDL, somewhere like Drummer Cove might need close to 100% EIA systems just to meet that TMDL. And so if these are performing 20% worse, then you have to deal with that through central treatment, because there's no other way to get better performance out of these systems. And so it becomes you have to weigh the risks as a municipality as to how much risk you're going to place on something that is really provisional technology. I mean, that's just part of it.
Yes, Ryan.
So I want to take advantage of Mr. Kleekamp being here. And I just have one question. It is kind of related to monitoring. It is about monitoring. Wellfleet has around 65% of its homes are seasonal. And what would a monitoring program even look like if the systems are only in operation, 3 to 4 months out of the year? And there's thousands of them that need to be checked.
Very good question that I don't have an answer for right now. I understand exactly what you're saying. The way I understand it now is, I don't believe it's monthly that these systems, but it's
I thought it was quarterly.
Collective sample, at a routine frequency. I think that exact type of question goes into the decision-making processes of the board, and how many of these kind of new thoughts are we going to have? That's a great kind of, what are we going to do about this? And then there's going to be another, well, how do we deal with this? And until we get a finite, concrete answer, a defensible answer on paper, this is what the consideration versus a traditional sewer system would be.
Thank you. Any other questions? None? I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for having us with them this evening. So I would like to ask for a motion to dissolve the Board of Health meeting for this evening?
I move to, you say dissolve, adjourn.
Adjourn, yeah, well, I like dissolve, I like it
Sounded
dissolved
awfully
better.
final.
Well, we're dissolving the whole thing, yeah. All right, well, how about just adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. 4-0.
I move
Okay.
to adjourn the select board.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Ryan, I, sorry, I forget,
Sheila,
I don't think
Josh,
I'm
aye.
good first.
And John, aye.
First
Uh,
opposed.
Mr. Kleekamp, thank you for your attendance.